Good morning and welcome to Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, and joining me live at Nasdaq HQ is Ryan Patel, global business executive and contributor for CNN. Sounds like you got a lot on your plate. Yes. Tell us exactly, before we get into the conversation of socially responsible investing, give us like a quick, from the top of the view down, what you do.
Well, I'm pretty much from a past life scaling companies. I used to do it for publicly traded companies and taking a startup and global. Now I get to sit on different boards, mid-size, from anywhere from fintech to B Corps and the nonprofit boards to really kind of help them strategically grow. So sitting on boards, and obviously now you mentioned the CNN piece, do a lot of media interviews now, and really kind of help provide that platform. And
join me on Trade Talks. You can add that to your resume as well.
I will.
Let's talk about global corporate social responsibility, because I think this is really at the forefront of investors' mind, even more so than the balance sheet. Again, at a global view, what are international and emerging markets doing to catch up to ESG in the U.S.?
Well, I think everybody had to take a step back for a minute and say, what does that really mean for each country, right? If you think about doing good overall, but look at China and India, for example, where there's a lot of problems problems they can try to solve. So why don't focus all their energies within regions, communities first, and find out, is it poverty, is it transportation? What are the things that we need to do as a government to provide entrepreneurs, companies, to be able to do, not just give back, but solve problems? Because I think that's what's kind of a different, it's not so much, hey, do good now, it's about how do you solve problems, and that becomes opportunity. Right? The narrative changed a little bit now, especially in global countries, because, hey, if you've got an ability to make an impact in, like, you take, for example, what in China specifically, JD.com, and they're really focuses, and the Craigslist of China, there's another group that focus on training people who don't have skills, rural workers, trying to really kind of step in where maybe some governments would be doing.
Right. Are there other sectors like financial services, for example? Because I've read a lot about that in different ESG pieces where financial services, mobile payments, bringing up developing economies to give them more mobility is a big theme there as well. Is that something that you see?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you talk about transportation. In India, I was in Hyderabad last year, and I've heard so many things about, you got Amazon coming, but there's other local companies that are trying to figure out how to get cell phones out there. How do you get different worlds of payment? So really changing, then drones are starting to come in to be able to get more supply. So it's kind of a one-stop shop now. That's what's happening. And it's fantastic to see, because obviously fintech and that perspective has become really the conversation around each of those economies.
Right, and you mentioned JD.com, but what are large companies doing overall to add value?
Yeah, I think, you look, I'm a big fan of, I keep continuing to say this is Unilever, right? I think they do a lot of great things, but to add value for a large company, this is my opinion, how do you influence other companies to do the same thing, right? That's the narrative that needs to happen now. It's, everyone needs to be able to do it, but you got to teach other companies, big companies, has to take the responsibility, not just for their consumers, but other companies underneath their wings and say, this is the way you need to do sustainability, this is what you need to do with the UN. And I think that's the next evolution of this. It's one thing about keep saying that you're going to do good. It's another thing, so how do you influence others to do it?
Right, and that was going to be my other question to you. What can boards continue to do to evolve, to grow? Because it just doesn't stop when you establish certain parameters. You have to evolve just as the markets evolve.
Yeah, and I think the board of governance plays a big role, because at the end of the day, there's this balance of making money and making the most money, and also make a balance of being a part of your community. And that decision is hard to make, to give it to just one person to make that decision. So I think the board of governance and the board of directors need to have a voice, need to step in and say, well, you know what, we'll take a little less profit here to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's not it's not an easy decision when you are a publicly traded company,
right?
And you have estimates to hit, and but it's kind of one of those things. To me, I think it's a must now. It's not so much hey, it's a nice to have. It's a necessary.
Right. Well, of course. I mean, again, going back to the balance sheet, this really is part of a thesis for fund managers, for personal investors, even younger investors, millennials. They look for ESG specifically before making investment decisions. So to hear that it's actually happening in real time is a win-win.
And listen, the board in the boardroom, we're all talking about this. We're talking about the younger generation. We're talking about how do you really get them, engaged. These conversations are absolutely happening, because if those companies are not happening, then they're falling off behind.
Right. Well, you want to be relevant too. That's one pattern I've noticed studying millennial habits. It's got to be relevant or else it's completely off the radar, like relevant to what's important to them, to the environment, to their location.
Well, and I think that's also driving to a little bit what you were saying. You were talking about companies in other countries, but entrepreneurial ideas of solving problems, they're kind of leading it. And I think you guys do a fantastic job at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, who is really kind of looking out to your guys' nonprofit arm, really trying to figure out how to elevate that. And that's pretty amazing to see a company trying to create all these ideas so that these young entrepreneurs or any entrepreneur can come and try to solve these problems.
I knew I loved working here. There's a reason for it. Well, thank you very much, Ryan, as always, for joining us. And traders, thank you. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.